Hello, hello, hello. Good morning to you, folks. Depending on where you are in the world, good evening, good afternoon. How is everyone doing this fine Monday morning? So, what's happening, folks? What's happening? On my side, what's going on is it's election season. The midterm elections are happening tomorrow, and it's also flu season. So I apologize for my voice, and I'm feeling a bit under the weather. I couldn't sleep last night at all because of I caught the flu. It is the flu season. I actually haven't had the flu in more than 6 years, probably longer than that. So it felt weird actually, and it just feels a bit. Look, man, I hate the flu, but it's what it is. I hope that you and your family members are safe, that if you are immune compromised, that you got your flu shot. Thousands of people still die every year in the US because of the flu, and that you have also given your kids the protection they need. With that said, it's election season, it's the midterm elections. The election is tomorrow. So it's 7 a.m. in El Paso right now, which means that in exactly I beg your pardon, in exactly 24 hours, the polls will open in Texas. And if you are in the West Coast, it's almost 6 in Los Angeles. The polls will open in 25 hours from now. These elections are very important, folks. And I just wanted to talk to you about what I actually want to say is, I know the polls have predicted that the Republicans will probably win the House with a majority of anything between 20 to 40 seats, and they're also likely to win the Senate by majority of maybe between 1 to 3 seats. That is still up in the air, obviously. But what I want to say though is that I want to warn you that Democrats will try to cheat in this election. That I am sure of. They will try to cheat. They will cheat. And the question really is that whether they will succeed in their schemes. I've been aware of Democrats cheating in elections since 2018. In the 2018 midterm elections, Florida, remember what happened in the Broward County? If you're not aware of that situation, you need to just Google 2018 midterm elections, Florida, Broward County, and just read that stuff. And you will be gobsmacked. And it's clear to me that in 2018 in Florida and in Arizona in that Senate race between Martha McSally and what's the name of this lady now, who is bisexual? Kristen Cinema. That was their trial run of massive of cheating, and then they perfected that at a large scale in the 2020 election. So here are the few things that you need to be aware of. When you start hearing Democrats saying that every vote must be counted, just know what time it is. Just know that it's that time. They are trying to cheat. Why am I saying that? I'm saying that because when the Democrats say to you that every vote must count, they don't mean every legal vote must count. They also mean every illegal vote that they are trying to smuggle illegally into the count in order to push their candidate. It doesn't matter whether it's a presidential candidate or a Senate candidate. That's what they mean. And the problem with this, every vote must count, is that it often goes with absentee ballots, mail-in ballots, which generally have a higher fraudulent rate than ballots that are in-person voting. So what tends to happen is that election night arrives, the Republican candidate is ahead by either 10,000 votes, 20,000 votes, or 100,000 votes in the case of President Donald Trump in Pennsylvania. And then all of a sudden, you hear that, oh, they have just discovered a bunch of ballots, and all the time they discover them in Democrat-run cities. And the problem with these ballots is that no one can tell you where they come from. No one can tell you when they arrived. Those ballots can't be verified. And Democrats refuse to get these ballots verified, but they insist that these ballots has to be counted. It's important that whenever ballots, mail-in ballots, absentee ballots, before they count, that what needs to happen is that they come in an envelope. And outside of the envelope, there's a signature. There's a name of the voter and their signature. So the first thing that needs to happen is that, okay, also then there's a stamp in terms of when the ballot was sent. And then there's a second stamp that says when was the ballot received by the post office. So the first thing that needs to happen is that you need to check the date at which the post office received the ballot. And if the ballot was received after the due date for absentee votes and mail-in ballots, that ballot is automatically disqualified. And Democrats don't want that. And then now you have these ballots that has not been disqualified, that they've arrived before the cutoff date of absentee ballots. And then the next verification process is the name and the signature. The name and the signature needs to correspond with the name that was registered under the voters' roll of that state. Number one, and number two, the signature needs to also correspond with the signature of that registered voter. And that generally happens with there's both parties needs to be there to verify this. So that, okay, everyone's happy. Everyone, you see the signature, you happy? And then once that's done, the ballot is taken out of the envelope and then put in the stack of other envelope of ballots. And then from that onwards, it's impossible to tell which ballot is which is why there needs to be verification at the time when the ballot has been removed from the envelope. And if there is any question about the authenticity of the ballot, that is when that ballot and its envelope are put aside in a pile of questionable ballots. It doesn't mean that it's illegal, it just means that these questionable ballots will be dealt with later. And the problem with Democrats is that they want every single ballot that arrives at a polling station has to be counted, regardless of of whether this process has been And I promise you, they will try to do this because they did it in 2020, they did it in 2018, and this is basically their way of stealing elections. This is not a conspiracy theory, folks. This is this was happening at a wide scale in Pennsylvania in 2020, to the point where you know that every like the U.S. Supreme Court has these jurisdictions where each justice has jurisdiction over a certain number of states, where the justice can issue orders who have the force of law until the full bench is able to sit and consider the matter. So it's often an interdict or injunction or a more elaborate order that the judge makes with regards to that particular situation. And in the case of ballots, it might look like how Associate Justice Samuel Alito in 2020 issued an order to electoral workers and authorities in Pennsylvania, especially in Philly, to say that each and every ballot that was received after the closing date of receiving of absentee ballots must be put aside. Each and every ballot, and it's already the law, but he had to issue this order. Each and every ballot that has no signature must be put aside. Each and every ballot that has a signature that is questionable or it's not clear also must be put aside. The reason being the case is that so that after the election, when litigation begins, then these ballots can be evaluated case by case. And then they can be evaluated to whether they can be added or not into the sum of votes. And the beautiful thing about this thing is that you don't know who the ballot would have voted for. You're just making a ruling based on what is on the envelope. And what happened is that electoral workers and authorities in Pennsylvania just disregarded this order. And remember that Donald Trump, by the end of the election day, who was ahead by 100,000 votes. So they just disregarded this order, and they put these questionable ballots into the count. And so when the matter went into the Supreme Court to be heard, remember the case with Texas and other states that were challenging the election results in Pennsylvania, in which Samuel Alito and Justice Clarence Thomas ruled in favor to hear that case, but they were the only ones who ruled in favor to hear the case. But the rules of the Supreme Court is that you need at least 3 Supreme Court justices that want to hear the case in order for the case to be heard. And that case was not heard. And the basis of the case not being heard, they said that Texas lacked standing. And there you are, folks. We had that mess. And for me to tell me that Texas lacks standing is the most ridiculous idea that I've ever heard in my life. That you're telling me that the second most populous state in the union lacks standing in ensuring that their votes are not being diluted in the count for the president of the United States by potentially fraudulent and illegal votes, because that's basically what the Supreme Court ruled. And you only had 2 men who were courageous enough to say, we want to hear this case. And Democrats are not those liberal talking heads in the media. They keep referring to the fact that, yeah, even Donald Trump's Supreme Court didn't want to hear this, ruled against him in the issue of electoral fraud. But what they failed to say is that the ruling of the Supreme Court was not based on the merits of the case. The ruling was that you had 6 justices who basically chickened out and who are basically were in dereliction of duty by saying that Texas lacks standing in hearing that case. And then you had this entire plethora of potentially illegal votes being added. So I'm just making an example here with regards. That's exactly what was happening in Broad County, where piles and piles of ballots were coming in the Broad County, and that woman, remember that woman who was in charge of that that polling station, she couldn't answer questions. Ask, where do these ballots come from? How many of them are still there? Have their signatures been verified? She didn't have any answer to these questions. And that's basically their standard practice of how they steal elections. They do the same thing in Detroit. They do the same thing in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They focus in certain specific Democrat-controlled cities who've been controlled by Democrats for decades, and that is where they smuggle these illegal votes. In Georgia, they were doing that in Atlanta. And Philly, for instance, Philly and Detroit have a long history of electoral fraud. And this electoral fraud is actually not fraud against Republican candidates. It's fraud that is perpetrated, that is between Democrats, where the powers that be in the Democrat committee in Pennsylvania, in conjunction with the DNC, collude to decide which Democratic candidate is supposed to win in a particular case in Philly. And that's been happening for decades. And there are many cases where it's been ruled that elections have been invalid and fraudulent, both in Philly and in Detroit. So I'm just telling you that you need to be aware that as soon as you start hearing these talking heads, it will start by Democrat candidates themselves, who at the end of election night, which is going to be tomorrow night, will be trailing and say they are trailing by, it doesn't really matter how many votes they're trailing by. And then you start hearing them saying every vote needs to count. But what they're not saying is that every legal vote needs to count. There is not a single place in the world, including my home country, South Africa, where every vote counts. Every legal vote counts in every legitimate democracy, or in this case, a constitutional republic. Every legal vote. And it has to be every legal vote because electoral laws are set way before elections. And if anyone feels or believes that their rights are being violated by electoral laws, they have an opportunity to challenge those laws long before the election happens. And so when electoral officers who are not empowered by the US Constitution or by the state's constitutions to write voting laws start doing things that are not supported by the US Constitution or by the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, what actually that is, it's fraud. And that's what Democrats do. I think for me, I was upset about the election of Donald Trump, but what upset me the most in the 2020 election was that Senate race in Michigan, where John James was clearly winning that race. And then out of the blue, John James was the candidate, the Republican candidate for Senate. And then out of the blue, his lead just started evaporating in some of the most questionable and dubious ways that I've ever seen in my life. Like, you're having ballots coming out of the blue. No one can tell you about the veracity of the what's the word? Chain of custody. Oh yeah, he was running against Gary Peters. I'm actually certain that John James did not lose that election. I'm positive. Because when John James started falling behind, it's the same kind of situation where ballots just magically appear. They can't be verified. They're unverifiable, and no one is interested in verifying them. And because these ballots 100% of the time come from or are dumped in Democrat-run cities where the mayor is a Democrat, where the police chief is a Democrat, where the electoral poll station chiefs are appointed by Democrats, where the entire polling system in that city is staffed, supported, appointed by Democrats. No one knows what's going on there. And then you factor in with the fact that electoral watchers getting kicked out, which is what happened in 2020. So for me, I'm just interested in finding out what exactly is going to happen tomorrow. Yeah, but anyways, folks, go vote if you're eligible to vote. I'm South African. I'm not. I can't vote. I can't even give money to political candidates, according to the Federal Electoral Commission. Vote, vote Republican down the ticket. I can say that because even as a foreigner, I am legally allowed to well, I have my First Amendment rights, obviously, but I also am legally allowed to provide to give support, in kind support to political candidates that is non-financial, and this could be considered obviously as in kind contribution to political candidates, which falls within the rules of the FEC. So vote, folks. Take your family and friends and foes and neighbors. Vote in person, and watch out. Watch out, because Democrats will try to cheat, and they will cheat. And the question really is that how effective is their cheating going to be? And will it be as brazen as it was in Pennsylvania in 2020? And would it be as difficult to prosecute as it was then? Because for me, if the 2020 level kind of cheating happens in this cycle, I don't think that the United States has a future as a constitutional republic. I don't think that there is a future at all. Because then you have people who, regardless of how popular or not popular they are, can't be voted out. Because they always find a way to win that is illegal. And if the US can't fix this in certain states, I'm gonna have to tell you that I don't trust any results that come out of California or New York City or New York State. Actually, I don't trust them at all, because firstly they don't have voter ID laws, so no one knows who the hell is voting there. So I know that Republicans are excited that Liz Alden is leading that whatever her name is in the polls, but I don't take that seriously, because come election night and then the few days after that, no one knows what the hell happens in New York City. And in New York City, you don't even need to have this sort of elaborate cheating scheme. All you need is illegal voters voting, because there are no requirements for voter IDs. And there's not a single country in the world that will allow that kind of foolishness. So I have my ideas in terms of how to fix the electoral system in places like California and New York City, but that's another story for another day. Because if you're gonna win, you better win fair and square. Fair and square. Remember, folks, that in 2020, right up until after Joe Biden was inaugurated, 30% of Democrats who said they did not believe that the election was free and fair. 45 to 50% of independents said they do not think that the election was free and fair. 70% of Republicans said they do not believe that the election was free and fair. And the question for me to Democrats and all those liberal talking heads at MSNBC and CNN and all these other Democrat propaganda networks is that, what then do they make of all these 30% Democrats who also felt that the election was not free and fair? What about these independents? If these authoritarian Republicans, the reason why they don't believe it was free and fair is because they're authoritarian and they're Nazis and all of that stuff, and they want to throw Granny off the cliff and they want to kill you, they hate you for your race and skin color and gender and for whatever alphabet soup, and they're just bad people. So what about the Democrats? What about the Democrats? What about the 30% of the Democrats who were polled who said the election was not free and fair? It will become increasingly clear that it's impossible to have a democracy, or in this case, a constitutional republic, when people can't trust the authenticity of the elections, and you can't trust it. You can't make people trust the results by telling them to trust the results. People trust the results if the process looks like it's on the up and up, and the results are that they lost, and they can go home saying, okay, let's do better next time. But that's not what happened in 2020. That's not what happened in 2018 also, in certain races that I was following. And yeah, that's that for me, folks. I think I'm just gonna sleep the entire day today because I'm not feeling well at all. The flu has got me by their balls. It's bad. I'm gonna sleep the entire day, and I'm gonna drink water. One thing that has always worked for me when I have their flu: sleep, drink water, because the flu tends to dehydrate people. This will dehydrate you. So, because I have a lot of work to do tomorrow, so I'm gonna probably sleep the entire day today. Pop some painkillers, drink a lot of water, and watch some last minute commentary on the election tomorrow. But listen, man, I don't know. We'll see how it goes tomorrow. But if 2020 is anything to go by, I have very little hope. But let's see, man. Cool. Thank you, folks, for watching. I'll catch you again soon. I was supposed to do the BLM question and answers video today, yesterday actually, then I got sick, so I couldn't do it. So I'll do it sometime next week. So leave your comment, leave questions, queries, disagreements, dissenting opinions, points of disagreements. Tell me what you think. Tell me who you think is going to win, especially the US Senate. Tell me what you think about election fraud. Yeah.